Hello, everyone. Welcome to 321 Gang's webinar, Tips and Tricks for Using GitLab in a Regulated Enterprise. My name's Kara Rawlings, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about 321 Gang before we dig in. So 321 Gang are a Platinum IBM business partner, a GitLab partner, an Atlassian partner, and a Scaled Agile Gold training partner. The Gang are the continuous engineering experts and an industry leader in scaling lean and agile practices. We offer our clients a powerful combination of expert SAFe, IBM, GitLab, and Atlassian consulting services, training, and software tooling solutions to accelerate and drive results in the most complex, highly regulated systems and software engineering environments. Whatever your goals, 321 Gang's engineering expertise can help. Whether you're facing regulatory, economic, or technological challenges, 321 Gang offers the most extensive catalog of industry-focused training, and we can help you with best practice guidelines on staying compliant, subject matter expertise to help you stay competitive, cost-effective courses you can put into practice immediately. So talk to us today and learn how we can help you deliver the solutions that your team needs. So we'll be accepting questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, and we'll be addressing them at the end. So please feel free to type them in as we go, as you think of them, and then at the end we'll be addressing them. So today's presenter is 321 Gang's Joe Mayer. Joe is a tools and process consultant who works with multiple regulated industries and helps them successfully meet their compliance requirements for the lowest cost possible. So Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kara, and thanks everyone for joining today. So as Kara said, this is going to be a session focused on how to work in a regulated environment with GitLab. And when I talk about being in a regulated environment, I mean people that have to report various data points across their organization, whether it be for functional safety, something like ISO 26262, or automotive compliance, aerospace and defense, medical devices, etc. Our customer base, when we talk about regulated customers, really fit into all of those buckets. So what you're going to see today, and what I'll kind of describe to you, is how we can link from requirements, test, workflow, change management, to modeling and SysML, all the way down to GitLab, where your source code and continuous integration can live. So I'm going to kind of be focusing on this area where your change management fits in with GitLab and the different policies and procedures you can do there, but I'll also touch on how that workflow component can link to these other things as well. So as Kara said, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll handle them later in the presentation. So today, like I said, I'm going to kind of talk a lot about how GitLab integrates with a product from IBM called EWM, or the Engineering Workflow Manager. That's really what IBM uses to manage their issues or their defects or their change requests, whatever you want to call them. The generic term is work item, as you can see here, and the EWM data is referenced by these little blue icons. Within EWM, these work items could be any type. It could be a change request, a defect, a task, or whatever. And we can create governance rules that dictate how and when the commits from GitLab, right, your actual code commits, your code changes, can and should be linked to these work items. And we can use these different rules given to us, or even a generic rule that says the work item must match a query, and we can do some very cool things with that. So we'll kind of talk through all of those. And if for whatever reason my commit message does not match appropriately to a work item that's authorized for change, I'll get an error condition similar to this one that you see at the bottom right of the screen, that the push operation cannot be completed. The way that works, there's really two pieces on the GitLab side. There's a webhook. If anyone who's familiar with GitLab knows what that means. It's really a mechanism to send an event somewhere else. In this case, that event gets sent over to EWM to create a link, a bidirectional link between GitLab and EWM. Additionally, there is a pre-receive hook, which is triggered when somebody tries to push code. That push operation kicks off the pre-receive hook, which validates that the commit meets our requirements. And the way it does that is it actually goes and queries the preconditions from the EWM project area and validates that the rules that I have defined are being met. So that's really how this integration works from a technical perspective. I'm happy to meet with anybody afterwards and give them more details if they'd like to talk more about this. But basically, we create the web link using the webhook, and then we have the pre-receive hook, which actually enforces the rules that we've defined. So for today, the process I'm going to be showing you guys in GitLab is really dependent on this concept of having a feature branch, right? So I have a branch dedicated to some specific new thing that I'm building. Within that branch, as I'm making changes, I'm committing the code to that branch and essentially using the messages and within my commit to create the linkages to RTC. That linkage is then validated. When I do my push of the commit, it confirms everything is working. And there are pipelines within GitLab that execute for each commit and for each merge request, which do everything from building and testing the code that I wrote to static analysis, license scanning, secret detection, etc., even up all the way up to deploying changes to some environment. Now, as you may imagine, a lot of our regulated environments, they can't deploy live to their devices, right? If you're building an airplane, you don't want to send a software update while the airplane is in flight. So what we typically talk about when we talk about deployment is deployment to some test bench or some test environment. So that's really what we're talking about there. Okay. So today, what I'm really going to show you is we'll talk through a work item from the EWM side and show you what's there, sort of like our request for change, for lack of a better term. We'll go create a feature branch in GitLab to make that change. We'll actually create the changes in a couple of different ways using the web IDE and using the sort of typical Git commit line. I'll show you what it looks like if you enter in a bad link, so to speak, one that's not authorized for change. And then we'll go create a merge request, review the changes, make sure everything is up to date and ready to go. Then ultimately approve and complete the merge and review all of the data that happened within there. Okay, and then towards the end, I'll try to dive a little bit deeper into some of the configuration of this. So with that being said, here's my GitLab project. It's very basic. It's just some Python code. I've got a couple of files in here, specifically math and hello world. They both also have some tests in here that validate that they work as defined. So just to look at this math one, you can see I've got an addition method and a subtraction method, very basic, as you can see. What I now have in my EWM instance is a feature request. So, bear with me. It must have logged me out while we were waiting to start. There we go. So this feature request is to essentially add multiplication. I can see the summary up here a little bit more, and benefit hypothesis has a little bit more details. I've set some other attributes as appropriate. But this feature request also has links out to the requirement that's being implemented. The software shall multiply integers, pretty basic, and a test case that's going to actually be a manual test that executes and validates that multiplication is correct, right? So all of that comes from this concept of having the IBM ELM, or Engineering Lifecycle Management, where I've got my work items or my change requests linked to my requirements, linked to my test case. Right, and I'll leave this page here with my links because we're going to actually see a few other links show up. So this is feature 2073. So if I'm going to come do work in my GitLab repository, again, because we're using that sort of feature branch process, I can come in here and create a new branch, call this RTC work item dash 2073. Create my branch, and you'll see it's now a branch in GitLab, which allows me to go make changes and try things out. As I mentioned in my slides, we can use the web IDE, which allows me to open these files and edit them on the web, or I can use the command line. So for those, command line enthusiasts, just to show you what that looks like, bear with me. Let me copy my URL over here. I can just run git clone-b. Bear with me, I don't remember, 2073. So I'm just telling it the branch name, so it checks out just that branch. And once I've done that, it's basically copying down the files that I need to my desktop. So now I can cd to that directory, do a listing, and I can see that's all my files, right? Run git status, it'll show me everything is up to date, right? So then what I can do is open up my GeoMath Python file, right? So you can see it's pretty basic. So I'm just going to copy this subtraction, and I'm going to add my multiplication down below. Right? Pretty basic. Hopefully everybody understands that, right? You don't need to be a Python expert to understand it. So I made my change. Now what I can do is commit it. I can run my git status again, see that there's a modified file. So I can run my commit -m tcwi 2073. And that's now added that file as a new commit to my local repository. So then the next step to push it up to the server, just push it to its origin. If I can type, there we go. Now that I've done that, oh, actually, let's see. So here's an issue where my push operation failed because my precondition has not been met. You see this? Oh, I know why. So this is a good case. If you notice in my commit message, let me pull it back up. You can see I have RTCWI-2073. That's not actually what I want. What I want to do is, oh, let me bring that back up. I'm going to amend this guy. And I'm going to take out the dash. So that's the valid tag back to my actual work item. So now that I do that, when I do git push origin, oh, come on now. Commit. Okay, well, let's pause there for a minute. So one of the rules that I have in place, just to go check, let's go make sure, because I was playing with this a little bit this morning, is you can see the governance that I've set on my project area. There's a push operation in EWM that allows me to require that a work item has the right comment and prevent associations to external items. So with that being said, I think that I have potentially an external item here. So what I'm going to do is just shift gears a little bit and show you what it looks like from the web IDE. So you can see here I'm in the RTCWI 2073 branch. I can open up my web IDE. And then in this case, it gives me those same sets of files. So I can edit my README. Let's just add a line here for webinar 2021. let's commit that guy. And then here, let's try this from this interface. And there you go. So now my commit is done. It's set up. It's merged to the branch. It's now creating a new merge request with the title set up similar to my commit message. I can assign this merge request to me. You can see I'm going to rely on somebody approving this here in a few minutes. And once I've got that done, I can just submit this merge request. Now, what's happening behind the scenes, because I created a commit, because I pushed it to that branch, now I've created a merge request. There's actually multiple pipelines that are running that are validating the change I made did not actually cause a problem. So bear with this. Let's let it catch up, and then I should be able to review the data. So as my approval user, now that this merge request should be submitted, I've switched browsers to where I'm logged in as the approver. I should be able to see that this merge request shows up momentarily and lets me review it. Okay, so I can see the merge request down here as an approver. Right, RTC WI 2073. From this merge request, if I want to review the original request, I can just open up the issue, click on this title up here, and it will open up my EWM issue and show me the work item with any links and anything else. So if the reviewer needs to come in here and review the requirements, the test cases, any of the other information that's stored in here, they can do that, right? Pop over to the links tab and you can see the requirements, the test case, and there's a new Git commit now as well. Okay. So with that being said, you can also see that this merge request is still running its pipeline, right? It's still working. I don't want to approve it yet because I'm not 100% sure the pipeline is going to work. I could come in here and have an overview comment that says, you know, I'm taking a look now, or whatever the case may be. Or I can just go look at the changes. And within these specific changes, it actually goes and finds the commits, it finds the specific files, brings up the specific files and shows me, hey, this one changed, and then I added this new webinar 2021. So I can add a comment to any of these lines of code and just say, you know, this is not the right syntax, or whatever the case may be. Start a review there, right? Now as my author, as the author, I'm also looking at this merge request. I can go over to my changes and I should be able to see that that comment now exists on that line that I can reply to, right? So I can see this is not the right syntax. My reply can be, you know, we've changed the syntax. This is now correct. So we can enforce that this sort of code review and approval happens. And once somebody that's authorized to do this, they can come in here and click Resolve Thread. They can come in here and click Resolve Thread and say, okay, this is resolved, right? We've resolved this comment or this issue. So now as the approver, I can see that that approval is now, I've got my reply. It was marked as valid, right? The thread is resolved. So when I go back to my merge request, hopefully the pipeline will finish here pretty quick and I'll be able to show you guys what that looks like. Okay. So once this loads, I'll be able to see the thread that was started. I'll be able to review the thread, go look at the changes again, do whatever other kind of reviews that I need to do. I can see the little notification up above that there were some comments created for the source code, but all the threads have been resolved. It's still running my pipeline. I can see if I hover over these, I can see that the build has passed, but it's currently running the tests, right? So it's running a bunch of various testing, specifically testing my unit testing and also running my static analysis. That's what this bandit is a Python static analysis. Overall, this pipeline looks like it's completed. So you can see here it's fully passed as of this commit. There were no security vulnerabilities found. We've resolved our threads. Any other checks that I need to make, I can confirm those here. And then ultimately, as the approver, I can mark it as approved, right? And now I've notified the team that I agree this is correct. So now as a team member, when I look at this, I can now see, I should be able to see that this has been approved. Let me hit refresh real quick. The pipeline is passed, it's been approved, all the threads are resolved. So my next step is I can actually create what GitLab calls a merge train. Now what a merge train is going to do is basically take these commits from this other branch, merge them with the master branch, perform the CI build and pipeline process against that, confirm it's still good and working and we haven't introduced any issues. And then that merge train will be complete, which actually puts the commits that I created along with any merged results onto the master branch. So I've started my merge train now. It might take in a minute for that pipeline to run and then show up on my master. But here in just a minute, it should show up on my master and show me that this particular feature is now complete, right? Now, with that being said, while we're waiting on that process to happen, I can come back to EWM, hit refresh on my feature, and you can see here, this feature now has the link over to the Git commit, and it has a link to the test case and a link to the requirement. So as a tester, right, somebody who needs to do manual testing here, I can navigate to this Git commit, which gives me that specific version of code as it existed at that time. And I can go download the binary or the source code or whatever it is I need to download from that particular version. And then when I'm ready, I can come in here and execute my test to validate that the multiplication was actually implemented correctly. Then I can mark that test as passed and ultimately come in and run a report that proves that this requirement was implemented by this feature work item and it was validated by this test case and it passed all of its checks along the way, including all of the code reviews that were required to commit the code into GitLab. So high level, that's the process that we're talking about. When we talk about using GitLab in a regulated industry, we're really talking about the ability to link upwards to requirements and tests at the system or user level, while then executing my unit test and kind of our functional test at the lower level as part of these pipelines within GitLab. So with all of that being said, are there any questions about anything you guys have seen so far?
Somebody was asking if this was Windows, Joe.
So my GitLab server is actually a Linux environment. If you see, this is my GitLab. It's running on a virtual machine under Linux today. My PC is a Windows PC, so that could very well be, it could very well be a syntax issue that I'm running into in the command line. But yeah, the GitLab server is significantly easier to set up on Linux than on Windows from what I found. So I used that for this demo environment just to get up and running quickly. But it could theoretically be installed onto Windows as well if you have a, a religious, decision there.
Okay, and then we just had a question about whether or not the session was being recorded, and it is. We'll be sending out a link so you can watch it and pass it along to your colleagues.
Okay, and while we're waiting on more questions to come in, just to show you guys, I'm going to go back to the main repository page and show you on the master branch. You can see that README file was updated, and it now includes webinar 2021. Makes sense? And I can even see in the README file, there's the last commit, which actually has a link back to the work item. If I needed to open that work item, brings me over here, shows me any of the data points, including now, because the merge request is complete, you can see it now has the original commit plus a link to the commit that was created during the merging of that branch to the master. Okay, Kara, any other questions?
I have another one. Is this out of the box EWM and GitLab, or are there special adapters?
This is completely out of the box. So I downloaded the Gitlab Integration from IBM. That's where, to go reference my slides, that's where I got this pre-receive hook from. That's from the IBM definition of how to integrate GitLab with EWM. The webhook is actually a default GitLab piece. And the way you get to that, let me show you up here. So in your EWM work item, or in your EWM project area, when you go work with Git, if you look at the registered repositories, because I registered this Hello World repository here, you'll see one of the things that I get is my webhook URL. So I copy this webhook URL and put that directly into my Gitlab EWM integration. So if I look here at EWM, I can see under EWM, I've got my link over to my EWM project area, the issues URL, new issue URL, and then I also have a webhook set up specifically for pushes and merge requests, which goes to that URL that I copied from EWM. So far everything you've seen is just out of the box. No custom scripting was required.
Great. So it sounds like if an organization is using the ELM requirements management, they would have to use RTC as well to link GitLab as well. Is that correct?
Well, honestly, there's multiple options. So if you're using EWM, you can get this link out of the box, and EWM provides these, where did they go? These preconditions, which allow you to kind of easily configure the rules that you want these commits to follow. There are many other customers that use Jira, and using Jira, you can create the link between Jira and GitLab fairly easily. But what we found is there tends to be a little bit of custom scripting that's involved to actually enforce these governance principles, right? So if you don't want to link to a closed issue in Jira, you actually have to put some logic into your script to validate it's not closed. Whereas that's kind of managed by these preconditions in EWM. But from a high level, if you're using EWM, this works sort of as I've shown you. If you're using Jira or some other issue management, as long as it supports the OSLC standard, we can probably get pretty close to this.
Okay. What happened with the multiply function? Do you have a unit test for it?
So I do have a unit test for it. Yeah, I mean, I shifted gears and sort of abandoned that from the command line, but just to show you, in my repository, I have my Joe Math file, and I have a test math. So I did not actually add the multiply. What I was really hoping to show you was I could add multiply from the command line, look at my, essentially my analytics over here, or my code coverage, and review the fact that, hey, this, you just dropped your code coverage, right? Oh, wrong one. Let's come down here. So here's my repository, and you can see my code coverage is hovering up around 90%. I was hoping if I add those 3 or 4 lines, I'll see that it drops down to, 90% or 85%. Then on the web, I was going to add my, test to push that code coverage back up to 92% or somewhere around there. Make sense? So that's one of the cool things with GitLab is you can define your pipeline to execute those unit tests and even higher level tests than that, that then can go and actually use the code you've written in your repository to execute those tests and come up with results. Make sense? And just to show you a little bit about what that looks like, if I look at my pipelines, I can see the latest one on the master branch here. And when I look at this, you can see all the different things that executed as part of this, right? Not only did it build my code, which in Python is pretty easy and quick, it also did the testing, which actually executes my unit test, static analysis, license scanning, secret detection, and then it deployed it to a production and staging environment. Now, if I look at this test, what this one does is it actually just executes those Python unit tests. So if you come down here, you can see it executes the test up above and then creates a coverage report to show me here's the files that I used, right? And most of them are valid except for this check issue link has 5 missed, right? And that's mostly just because it's kind of a weird file I abandoned and haven't bothered to finish the testing of it.
So this is a follow-up. If the multiply function changes and is committed again, how does that, it kind of cut off. How does that visioning show up in EWM?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So if I change the multiply function again, how does the vision show up?
Versioning. How does that versioning show up in EWM? That was my mistake.
Oh, sure. So every commit you make has a unique ID. Bear with me as I get back to that feature. So every commit you make has a specific ID, right? If I hover over this link, you can see down at the bottom, it goes to the GitLab and it passes in this git commit SHA-1, which is basically a unique key for that particular commit. So when you follow this link, it will actually take you to that commit, which then shows you that specific version of the file as it existed when this commit was created. Does that make sense? So it doesn't necessarily capture that method A and file B changed. What it captures is here's the commit that was created. And when I follow a link to that commit, you'll see how it sort of displays itself in the GitLab web interface. It shows me where the commit came from. Here's the merge request that merged it back. Here's a pipeline that ran against the commit. And here are these specific file changes that happened during that commit. I hope that answers the question.
Well, it does. He said thanks.
Okay.
Okay. So what level of work item customability is there in EVM? Is it the same as RTC or is it more boiled down?
No, EWM is the new name for RTC. So you can do a ton of things. If I come over here to the edit project area, I can just add a new work item type, right? So here are the types that are in this particular process. And maybe I don't like the name, retrospective, and I just want to call this meeting minutes. Well, that's okay. I just make that change, hit save, And then when I come back in here, let me hit refresh, and I should be able to create a new meeting minutes object. You see this down here. And when I create that, the fields, you can see these are different than the feature. You can have different tabs. We call these sort of views of the data editors, and you can create it in any way that makes sense for your team to track whatever it is you guys need to track.
So this sounds like a follow-up. Particularly, can I enforce transitions to custom states based on values on the form or other criteria?
You mean you want to auto, I think what you mean is you want to automatically transition. So like if I set this to ready, it would automatically move the state to the ready state or something like that. The short answer is that particular control is not an out-of-the-box configuration. It's absolutely doable, but we would likely have to write a tiny bit of custom code. What is available, this is the same area I was setting up my push rules. We can set up preconditions on these work items to validate those things. So we can say that there are required attributes. So if someone tries to go to that ready state without filling out the correct data, it won't let them. It'll warn them, hey, you need to make these updates before you move to this state. Or you can require approvals at different states, and you can do different things like that using a lot of these out-of-the-box rules. But there is not an out-of-the-box rule today that will automatically move your record to a different state. That's something that we would be happy to work with you to create, but it doesn't exist today.
Great. One more question. Can you talk through the governance rules we can implement with this integration?
Sure. Yeah, so if I look at my push operation, I only have some of the basic ones installed today, but you can require that a work item hint is in the commit comment, meaning that when I commit something, I specify which RTC or EWM work item I'm using. I can restrict association to closed work items. That means if I close my feature or it has been previously closed, I can't link any more commits to it. I can force the user to only push their own commits. So then I can't push someone else's commits. I can only push my own commits. I can prevent associations to external work items. So if I try to cross the project area boundary in EWM, it won't let me, right? If I'm working in my, component A project area and I link to a work item in component B, it won't let me do that. I can also make sure that the author is not an approver, can make sure that the author is the owner, right? So I prevent work item linking if the author is not the owner. And I can require work items to match a query, which really gives me the ability to do anything. A query I could create based on status or any other custom field in my database and just say, it must match that query. It must have the right owner, the right, plan for is set, the state is correct, it's been approved, or whatever the other data elements I need. And by giving me this match query, it really lets me set up just about any rule that I want to force my governance.
Great. Well, if there are no more questions, it looks like that concludes our presentation for today. So as I said earlier, the session was recorded and it will be available for playback by close of business on Friday at 321gang.com, and it will be under the resources tab. So that's where you'll also find all of our previously aired presentations. So you can give them a listen. So for more information, or if you have any other questions that come up or are interested in hearing more about GitLab, please email us at info@321gang.com or Joe directly at joem@321gang.com. Thanks for presenting, Joe. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Kara.
Bye-bye, everyone.